One coaching move was made, another apparently won't get made, and this can't be it, right? This just can't be it. Good morning to you. Good Wednesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday if you're into hockey and or baseball. I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates that I hope you'll take the time to check out. Gerald Alexander, who'd been reported peripherally to be coming to the Steelers, did in fact get hired by the team yesterday as their new defensive backs coach. In turn, Grady Brown, who held that position previously, is out, did not get renewed. Brown's contract was up after the season. Remember that, because it's kind of important here. Alexander shows up with a reputation for getting his DBs to get their hands on the football, and not just to get their hands on it, but to hang on to the thing. When he was with the Steelers, he was an assistant DBs coach. This was back in the 2022 and 23 seasons. The Steelers totaled 36 picks. That was second most in the NFL. Going back to his time in Miami, when he was a defensive backs coach outright, the Dolphins led the league with 18 picks in the COVID year 2020. Now, Brown's DBs also obviously had their share of picks, and Brown came with his own known pluses. But if you'll pardon yet another dose of cynicism in the aftermath of that 5-game collapse, this feels like the most lateral move in the history of lateral moves. Without knowing or claiming to know everything that could have gone on the inside as it relates to the secondary, or even as it relates specifically to just one player, one vital player like Joey Porter, where you'd say, Brown needed to get Porter to be at this level, and he only got him to that level. Okay, that's the stuff that we can't know, and we're not going to know, barring some, magical, wonderful leak of information that we could all feast on. But the only reason I'm even bothering anybody with talking about this move or this non-move is that Pat Meyer, by every accounting, is staying on. And Meyer is signed for another year. Now, if I'm thinking in the most broad, abstract sense about the state of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I'm thinking about the young, high pedigree players that most needed to be coached up, that would have brought the greatest value to the team, again, as a whole, had they been instructed to perform at some higher level. I mean, we're talking about the offensive line. How could you not be talking about the offensive line? So if, and I'm only presuming this part, if you replace Brown with another guy even in part because of you didn't like the way Porter progressed, or you didn't like the way he faded near the end, or you didn't like the 900 penalties that he took, then someone would theoretically need to explain how Porter would have hurt the Steelers more than, say, Broderick Jones, taken in that same draft class, but oh my goodness, talk about a regression. And don't forget, that's the apt terminology when it comes to Brod, because he had a rookie season. We didn't even say his name. We treated him in his rookie season, throughout his rookie season, the way we just treated Zach Frazier. Zach's awesome. We love Zach. You know why? Because we never mentioned him. We never noticed him. Perfect. That's how Brod was in 2023. That's how everything went with him. And now, in 2024, here he was. He was a right tackle that you couldn't take your eyes off. Whether it was a run or a pass, all you were worried about was whether or not 77 was going to get his clock cleaned again. How that's not at least partly on Meyer, I can't even fathom. How the Steelers could engage in this same process, a singular process of evaluating their coaches, and sell themselves on the idea that Grady Brown is a problem and he has to go, but Pat Meyer isn't, and he has to stay, while somehow convincing themselves maybe that the contracts aren't a factor. Do you know what positional coaches make in the NFL? I tried to look this up. This was earlier in the week. And you're never going to get real good answers on this. Coordinators obviously get into seven figures. They get, some of them, 3 million, 4 million, whatever it is. Positional coaches are in the range of around 300,000 to 400,000. And for those of you who don't know, it might be new to football. What it mean when I say positional coaches is like that, like offensive line, wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, anything that's below the coordinator level. Not anything, but the next tier down below the coordinators. They're all around 300, 400. And I'm not begrudging anybody that. Those guys, oh man, do they work. Ridiculous hours, especially in season. But from the perspective of a National Football League operation, any one of the 32 franchises, that's a drop in the bucket. That's nothing. There should be 0.00000% of your decision that is based on whether or not you might have to pay somebody an extra $300,000 to just go away. When we come back, J1Q.
This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar.
Today's J1Q comes from Derek. And he asks, DK, when you don't fire coaches after a bad season, aren't you just telling everyone that the coaching is fine and that it's the players not executing? Isn't that a bad look? Yeah. That's such a mic drop on your part, Derek. I'm tempted to just kind of end the program there. Except for one thing. You had me right up until the last two words. Bad look. Here's why. I don't care. I don't care what the look is. I don't know that anybody should care what the look is. They should care what the reality is. You have a salary cap that constricts, defines really, meaning in either direction, what you can pay your players. There is no such creature when it comes to your coaches, your staff, anybody that's involved in your support operation. You can pay as much or really as little as you want. Nobody's going to say anything to you. You're not going to be very good if you don't pay up, but nobody's actually going to come at you and wag a finger and say, hey, this is wrong. You're breaking the rules, the way they would with the cap. So even though the cap tends to mute out most discussion and debate related to cheapness, it'll still come up with teams like the Bengals, for example, some of the cheap things they've done over the years that have had a spotlight harshly shined on them. But for the most part, it doesn't come up. Even when in Pittsburgh, we're talking about Mike Tomlin's coordinators and his assistants, the subject that's most common is, well, Tomlin doesn't have the coaching tree. And when that arises, what we end up doing is discussing Tomlin's ego. He could never have somebody who, speaks up against him or looks like he'd be a threat to take his job or anything like that. But you don't hear, at least not very often, that they're just not paying. Or if you hear that they are paying salaries that are in line with other teams, then what happens is they keep guys beyond their usefulness and let them ride out contracts principally because they don't want to pay them to do nothing, because then they have to bring in somebody else to pay either that same amount or somewhere in that range, maybe even more. Now, this is going to be a cruel tease here, but I'm going to bring up Mike Munchak, who is every Steelers fan's favorite example of a coach they'd love to see come back. Everybody, there can't be any exceptions to this. It's all about bring Munch home. And I get that. Munch oversaw a great group, and I mean group, of offensive linemen. And even with all the experience and the star power of a Marquise Pouncey and a David DeCastro, never stopped teaching them, never stopped working with them to learn new things, to get better. Let's say, hypothetically, and Munch is kind of a complicated dude, so don't presume that this is even possible. But let's say that the Steelers had a situation where they could give Munch, I don't know, let's have some fun here, $1 million. $1 million a year to just be the offensive line coach. Would that throw the structure out of the whack? Sure. And you know what you say? Too bad. Because in addition to being a great offensive line coach, Munch also was a head coach in the National Football League. Not to mention a world-class player, reputation, everything else, okay? So what? We're going to pay him $1 million. And we're going to pay Pat Meyer in turn whatever he's getting, let's say it's $300,000, to just, go away. You don't do demotions, by the way, at this level. That just doesn't happen. You're going to fire somebody, you fire them. But the contract is the contract. Well, now the cost of doing business in your offensive line room just grew by, $1 million. And there you have it. And that sounds like, wow, that's not nothing. I mean, it's $1 million. But now, look at your payroll. Overall, look at what a normal NFL team pays to its quarterback. Look at what the job is of these offensive linemen. Look at the money that you're giving them. Isaac Seumalo and James Daniels each were at around $8 million this past season, each one. But you can't spare $1 million for a guy who could be the glue for all of that? You see what I'm saying? That's why I don't want to get anybody's hopes up here. Now I'm going to get Munch questions for the next 3 months. I'm just trying to point out that the scale of the money, what fits within the coach's ladder or the precedence, isn't anywhere near as important as winning the football games. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers. We'll be back with another one of these tomorrow.